Chung-in, what do you see as the current prospects for peace on the Korean Peninsula, and any chance of the armistice agreement being turned into a permanent peace agreement in the not too distant future?
In fact, the idea of how this transformation of armistice agreement into some sort of peace accord was a part of President Moon Jae-in's bigger Korea peace initiative. What he had in mind is this: he had in fact pursued some contradictory policies. First, he emphasized, he came up with three basic principles in dealing with peace on the Korean Peninsula. The first principle is no war, peace first. That is the first principle of his Korea Peace Initiative. Okay. Therefore, his primary obsession has been prevention of war on the Korean Peninsula. In doing that, peace has become very, very important instrument. Therefore, peace for him was a goal in itself. At the same time, was an instrument to prevent war on the Korean Peninsula, because President Moon Jae-in himself was the son of a North Korean refugee who fled Hungnam, in January 1951. Okay, therefore he has, really no to war was one of his primary emphasis. Second one is no nukes. Okay, therefore he adhered to the so-called 1991 Joint Declaration on the Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And he has been arguing that South Korea abides by that declaration, but North Korea did not abide by that declaration. Therefore, it's now North Korea to turn to the denuclearization. By doing that, he wanted to really achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, denuke is the second principle. And third principle is, no regime change in North Korea. If he sent a very clear message to North Korea, okay, we know that it is neither desirable nor feasible to change regime in North Korea. It is up to you. We wanted peaceful coexistence with you. I have no intention of influencing North Korean regime. Those are the three principles. Out of three principles, then he pursued the first strategies. First strategy is a peacekeeping strategy. Peacekeeping strategy all about the prevention of war on the Korean Peninsula. Through what? Through military deterrence and alliance. Okay, and particularly in the light of so-called North Korea's military provocation in July and afterwards 2017, he realized how important it is for South Korea to have a credible conventional military deterrence against North Korea. For that reason, he also emphasized the importance of maintaining strong alliance with the United States. That has become one of the important strategy of his peace initiative. But second strategy is that he always argued that we should go beyond peacekeeping. Okay, therefore we should pursue peacemaking. Peacemaking has an element of tension reduction and confidence building measures, and adoption of declaration to end the Korean War, and then transformation. If the end of the Korean War declaration is adopted, then he thought that will be very much a political declaration, but that can propel both the transformation of armistice agreement into some sort of peace accord, along with progressing denuclearization of North Korea. And third element is what he terms in the peacemaking, the peace building approach, framed around peace economy. I would say that he was kind of functionalist, saying that improving inter-Korean economic exchange and cooperation, and energy networks, infrastructure networks that can lead to the economic community composed of North and South Korea, which would in turn lead to the fuller integration between North and South Korea. Once there is that kind of peace economy, gets institutionalized, then there's a very little chance for any kinds of conflict on the Korean Peninsula. But he was following Kantian capitalist peace kinds of argument there. Okay, and that's the third element. And finally, fourth element is proactive strategy or proactive diplomacy. He wanted to, because South Korea, even North Korea, particularly South Korea, has been kind of a dependent variable to be influenced by four major powers, particularly by the United States and China and Russia. And he wanted to get out of that kind of trapping structure. He wanted to lead in bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula, in fostering denuclearization of North Korea. Therefore, he studied with, and then I just missed one point. Then what he's doing all these things, his goal is very simple. His goal is to make the Korean Peninsula peaceful, prosperous, and nuclear weapons free. Therefore, for that goal, peaceful, prosperous, nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, he adopted 3 principles and he employed 4 strategies. Its outcome is very much mixed, and particularly for the past several days, the prospect seems rather gloomy because of President Moon decided to go ahead with planned allocate U.S. joint military exercise and training, and North Korea, which opened suspended channels of communication on July 27th, again shut down just 2 days ago. There was no communication between the two Koreas. And the Kim Young-chul, Vice Chairman of Central Committee of Korea Workers' Party, as well as head of Department of United Front, issued a statement yesterday saying that South Korea and the US should expect a major security crisis coming. Okay, you have not given up hostile policy on North Korea. That threatens our survival, that hampers our people's right to development. Therefore, we'll go, what the 선대성 and 강대강, that means strong for strong, good for good. Okay. Therefore, now they decide to pass to strong for strong. There is a current situation in South Korea. They are very uncertain and precarious.
Oh, well, I think historically, if we can look at this in sort of 2 broad periods. One is from about 1991 to roughly 2002, which was a period based on as much engagement as military containment. And the main game at that point was primarily bilateral between the United States and North Korea. South Korea was a bit player. It was important, very important, but the North Koreans insisted that they needed to deal with the United States as their primary adversary. And so we saw the whole structure set up of the 6-party talks, the Cato Energy Assistance Program, and everything that went on at that period was essentially in that framework. In the second period, which really began under Bush Jr., President Bush Jr., after they essentially declared that they were no longer in the engagement game in 2002, when they sent Jim Kelly to Pyongyang to not talk to them about enrichment of uranium. When we look back, we can see that was really the beginning of the end of American, what I call nuclear hegemony in the region, and that we were moving rapidly into a kind of interregnum where the old framework based on bilateral nuclear alliances was no longer really going to carry the water for the United States or the Allies. And it didn't. The North Koreans were not engaged. They broke out, they tested, and of course, things fell apart in the United States when Trump was elected. Obama did nothing, sat on his hands. Things went from good to bad in South Korean politics, on again, off again, stop-start engagement. And the North Koreans kept on proliferating, because why wouldn't they under those conditions? And so I think we've seen a fundamental failure of American leadership at this point, and the onus is therefore shifted back to where it probably should always have been, onto the region. All the different small, medium, and large powers in the region, and most critically, North and South Korea, need to come to terms with the new situation created by the North Korean nuclear breakout. Now, as you know, many listeners will know, or readers will know, since about 2011, groups affiliated with the Nagasaki University Research Center for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, plus their various partners in the region, in the United States and Europe, have been pushing for a framework called a Comprehensive Security Framework, which Mort Halperin first spelled out at the 2011 APLN Nautilus workshop in Tokyo. And essentially Mort said, what we need is a framework that has at least 6 necessary elements to it to achieve a positive peace, not just a cold peace as we have at the moment. And the first is an end to the war. And an end to the war can be done very simply. It actually doesn't need a formal treaty. It just needs some form of declaration by the leaders of the warring states party to the conflict, and they can just move on. Or if they want to make it more complicated and have lots of dancing around the table, they can negotiate peace treaties, but it's really not necessary to have a legal treaty. So end the war, but that doesn't mean ending, that will mean ending the armistice, but it does not mean an end to a constructive US role in the Korean Peninsula. That would depend on what happens to UN command and to US forces Korea, which is something that rests between the United States and South Korea, and South Korea, the United States, and all the UN command allies. There's a whole multilateral structure there that could be reshaped so that UN command or its replacement becomes a pivot deterrent to make sure that the two Koreas are assured that neither will attack each other, and also have some over-the-horizon great power backing to assure them that they don't necessarily face a threat from China, Russia, or Japan, the great powers that are within view on their horizon. The second necessary element is a treaty of amity and cooperation at a regional level. And this could be modeled somewhat after the Southeast Asian Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. But under that rubric, you would have some form of Security Council, some form of summitry of heads of state, senior diplomatic and military officials would meet. There are a number of different models in Europe and elsewhere for such a structure, ASEAN itself. But that decision-making entity would not just deal with Korea. And it's very important that it not just deal with Korea, because otherwise Korea will feel isolated and shamed by such a structure, rather than as a co-equal contributing partner to the international society that's created by such an institution, a Northeast Asia security institution. It's also obvious that we would need in this comprehensive security framework some form of assistance to reconstruct North Korea's collapsed economy and provide them with a pathway into a prosperous and sustainable future. There's been an enormous amount of work done on this in Korea, in the United States, in Europe, and in China, less so in Russia, but even in Russia there's some. But to us, the fundamental lesson of the first period of engagement that we should not is that we should not repeat the errors of the six-party talks, and that what is done to assist North Korea should set out to create mutually probable benefit between the two Koreas and mutual assured interdependence between North Korea, South Korea, and all the neighbors in the region. And that whatever serves the purpose to create regional interdependence will buffer North Korea against South Korea overlordism on the one hand, and will assure South Korea that North Korea can't simply block whatever is put in place for energy infrastructure, other forms of networked infrastructure under some form of multilateral assistance program to North Korea. And then the final element that was spelled out that I think is very important, given the primacy of the nuclear weapons issue and the perceived threat in Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington, and these days even in Beijing and Vladivostok, of the North Korean nuclear weapons capabilities, is a nuclear weapon-free zone that achieves the full and complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And the use of the phrase Korean Peninsula is very important. It should not just be North Korea, because North Korea correctly perceives and demands that the American nuclear threat also be removed from the peninsula. Now, this might be done just on an inter-Korean basis, as was prefigured in the original denuclearization declaration of 1992 between the North and the South. But such a declaration and anything that follows from it is, strictly speaking, just a political agreement. It's not a legally binding treaty of others' sovereignty over the peninsula. And so the appropriate way to actually achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is a regional nuclear weapon-free zone, which brings the North Koreans into full compliance over time, in return for which North Korea, South Korea, and Japan get a non-use against them guarantee, not just of the United States to North Korea, but from China and from Russia to South Korea and Japan, again in an equal manner, not just supplying security goods to North Korea, but everyone benefits. And so they're the elements of comprehensive security that we can see. And of course, what undergirds all that through the engagement process is the building of trust relationships at many different levels. And without that, none of this will happen, in my view, after working on this for nearly 40 years. It's the trust relationships that actually make any of these elements possible.
Can I add to what Peter said?
Yeah.
Really, trust building is very, very important. Tension reduction and CBM process is very, very important. Then CBM is all about making small successes, but North and South Korea have failed to produce the small successes. United States and North Korea have failed to produce small successes. One exemption was 1994 Geneva framework and the KIDO, Korea Energy Development Organization process. That was a successful case, but John Bolton literally, destroyed the process. But here, central elements of the Korean problem is closely related to the issue of hostile policy in North Korea. Therefore, we should really pay attention to what North Korea has been demanding. North Korea wants US to remove its hostile policy in North Korea that threatens North Korean people's survival and that undermines North Korean people's right to development. And particularly first part, so-called how to then prevent the threatening of North Korean people's survival. It's all about the military dimensions, and how to assure North Korean people's right to development. That is related to sanction relief. But as the first, the most important step could have been in this adoption of end of war declaration. But US has been enormously critical of that one, particularly not in a Trump administration or in a Biden administration, but the Washington mainstream people have been extremely critical of end of war declaration. Reason, very simple. If there is end of war declaration that will lead to the ending of armistice agreements, then that will bring about major issues regarding status of United Nations command in Korea. In fact, if armistice agreement is gone, there is no raison d'etre for the United Nations command. Okay, but US wanted to maintain United Nations command. And there is another issue. Another issue is about the transfer of wartime operational control from the US to South Korea. Right now, wartime operational control over South Korean forces are now, held by the U.S. commander in South Korea, who is also commander of ROK U.S. Combined Forces Command. Okay, and President Moon Jae-in wanted to really get back that wartime operational control during his tenure, but it is very unlikely given the current progress. But all these things, on the one hand, in the possibility of dissolution of United Nations Command, on the other hand, transfer of wartime operational control to South Korea, then that would lead to the what? Fundamental change regarding division of labor between American forces in South Korea and our ROK forces. And in fact, the US and South Korea have agreed to create the so-called Future Combined Forces Command, in which South Korean First Star General would become commander, American First Star General would become the deputy commander. But no one in Washington would buy that in argument. Then that is why US has been trying to come up with the idea of maintaining United Nations Command. Okay. Therefore, United Nations Command then will be the supreme commander in South Korea, within which then United Nations Command would have ROK forces, and now US forces in South Korea, and ROK US Combined Forces. Then it will become very, very contradictory. On the one hand, deputy commander of ROK US features in the Combined Forces Command will be American First Star General, who would become commander of United Nations Command. And therefore, since the past 4 years, there has been very intense discussions on the regarding the new division of labor among United Nations Command, ROK Joint Chief of Staff, US Command in South Korea, ROK's Combined Forces Command. But US and South Korea have not reached any agreement yet. Therefore, it is in limbo. Okay. Then there's another factor. If armistice agreement is dissolved or replaced by the new peace accord, then there is the issue of American forces, the status of American forces bases in Japan. There are 7 American military bases in Japan are tied up to the armistice agreement as part of Japanese support of United Nations Command in South Korea. Therefore, now Japanese government has been raising questions on the ending of the Korean War and the transformation of armistice agreement into some sort of peace accord. Therefore, they are all, as Peter pointed out, it's really Korean vortex. There are so many technical issues, but they are not the light issues. They are very, very serious issues. Therefore, unless we really come up with some kind of international commission to work it out, every single detail of those conflicting dimensions, it will be extremely difficult to make a peace on the Korean Peninsula.